Now, we are about to go live to the Brisbane rally, and we are going to be interviewing none other than Senator Rennick. And we also have live on the ground Counterculture News. The legend Jake will be logging in very, very shortly in order to present that. If you guys are watching, again, I want to remind you, share this far and wide. We need more hearts and minds open. As I mentioned, look at the lineup that we've had. Doctors, senators, and we've got some absolute rippers for you coming up this afternoon. And we can see there that the, the senator and Jake are just getting all ready to go in a moment. Are they live? Are they? They're live. All right. So, Jake, we are live from Brisbane. Can you hear us, guys?
Yes, we can. We can.
Awesome. And Senator Rennick, how are you, my friend?
Thanks, Andy. How are you?
Awesome. Guys, we've had some fantastic guests, but I've been so excited to speak to both of you. I'll quickly just start with Jake. Jake, what's it like on the ground? You're from Counterculture News. Tell me what's happening.
Yeah, so far we actually started the day at a protest to oppose the far-right anti-vaxxer fascists. And I tried to go into the middle of the crowd and see if I could get a definition of fascism, but didn't quite manage that. And then we moved on to the anti-mandate freedom rally, and it's been unbelievable. The atmosphere here is just amazing.
Interesting. So tell me a little bit about the anti-racism, anti-fascist protest. How many people do you estimate were there for that side?
I'd say there was probably about 60 people there at the anti-vaxxer opposition protest. And then I'm not sure what the numbers are exactly, but I would say that there's people in the multiple thousands here, definitely. And it could blow out to, we don't know how much yet, but the numbers are completely outweighed. And when we were at the anti-fascist protest, there was Antifa flags everywhere. There was all kind of ideological talk being done in the crowd, and there was a speech where they weren't really standing for anything except for persecuting the people who don't want to get vaccinated. So that was basically the narrative in a nutshell.
Very interesting. There is a lot going on, that is for damn sure, and I'll be interested to see how all that goes. But I do have a feeling that we're going to see some of the biggest protests in our country's history today across all states. Melbourne, Sydney, and of course in Brisbane and moving forward. It is so good to see the Australian people actually giving a shit, caring about where we're going as individuals and caring about our liberties, our freedom to choice, our freedom to privacy, etc. And one man that's been fighting that good fight publicly and privately is none other than Senator Rennick. So again, I want to say a huge thank you for joining us, Senator Rennick.
Yeah, hi Andy, how you going?
I'm going very well, my friend, very well. Again, I want to say a huge thank you. I'm gonna leave for a second and let you speak to the audience and share your thoughts and some of your wisdom, and then we'll come back in and we're gonna have a quick chat at the end.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for having me here today, Andy, and thanks for everyone who's tuned in. Look, today's just about making sure that we basically protect our civil liberties, which I feel have been eroded over the last 18 months. I don't think we have a health crisis anymore. I think we have a political crisis. Look, the country's 84% double jab for people above 16. I would have thought, if you'd said to the Prime Minister and the Premiers a year ago, would you take, 84% double jab as being the reason, enough to, move on from COVID. Obviously, while we still need to protect the weak, don't get me wrong, I think most people would say, yeah, sure, I'd take it. What we need to do and what I want to raise awareness of is people who've suffered from vaccine injuries, number one. I want people to be able to keep their jobs. They should not have to lose their jobs because of their views about, whatever it is, for whatever reasons that they don't want to take the vaccine. We've got 84% double jab, and I'm sure that'll actually probably get higher. So, there's a thing called herd immunity that was spoken about a lot this time last year, and now suddenly it's all been forgotten, and we need to keep sort of imposing and destroying civil liberties, which I don't think is right. I myself personally are against vaccinating children, young children. I don't think we need to do that at all. There's been over 50,000 people under 20 who've contracted COVID and no one's died from it. So I don't think I think the risk from the vaccine isn't, worthy of the risk from the vaccine is worth the risk of what someone might have, the young children might have from COVID. So that's about it. And of course, the last one, of course, here, especially this counts a lot in Queensland, is that we get the borders open. We've got thousands of Queenslanders who are being treated like refugees in their own country. I think there's about 3,000 people in the town of Murwillumbah, Queenslanders living in a tent city there. I think they have a right to come back home to Queensland. I think the border closures have gone on for far too long, and that they need to stop. I guess that's pretty much where we're at. Today it's great to see. I know there's a lot of nurses and a lot of people who are worried about losing their jobs. There's a lot of families here with their children, we want to speak up respectfully and make sure we get our voices heard, or the people have their voices heard and get their voices heard, both here in Brisbane, in the Parliament House here in Brisbane, and also in Canberra.
Mate, I couldn't agree more. And again, it's so important to have individuals like you representing us and speaking out. So again, I said this to you the other day. Again, I want to say a huge thank you, because it's not easy jumping on TV, getting grilled, and then grilling back. And it's not easy going into Parliament. It's not easy going to rallies like this and speaking your truth. But the fact is that we need more people doing exactly that. And again, we're really thankful. What sort of people are you seeing on the ground there today, Senator Rennick? And is it far-right extremists, or is this mums and dads and your average Joes?
Look, I'd say it's average Joes. You can never tell, right? It's always. But look, I know the people who are out there who are suffering, and they're hard-working Australians who, want to keep their jobs. Many of them are nurses who've worked on the front line on COVID in the last 18 months. That's particularly hard to see those people who've protected us now, have society turn their back on them. They are very passionate about their role. I'm very, sympathetic towards nurses. My mum was a nurse up until she was 70, and I know how hard they work. They work, they're on their feet all day. They're tending to the sick, and they work long shift hours as well. And I've got a lot of policemen who've contacted me. I've had firemen who've contacted me. And then I've had a lot of parents who've contacted me as well, who are worried about they don't want their children to get the jab, and while it may not be necessarily compulsory for them to get the jab, they know that their children are going to be discriminated against because they can't go to school formals and things like that. So look, these are just normal, everyday Australians, working class Australians, who are worried about the erosion of civil liberties over the last 18 months. They're worried about losing their jobs, and they're worried about the government overreach for me, I hope that this isn't an omen of things to come where, Gold Coast posts keep getting moved all the time. Good example, a good example is quarantine centres. We don't need quarantine centres. And yet, I know people, some sections of the government want to build quarantine centres. And it's sort of like, well, if the country's double jabbed, why do we need quarantine centres? So, there's things like that where we really need to move on from and just let people get on with living and not have to worry about their everyday, civil liberties being eroded.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, with all of that said, these big decisions are being made with very little transparency and very little evidence showing us why we are doing such extreme measures. Why are we putting, millions and millions of dollars into building these camps and not putting it into our healthcare system? Why are we mandating it? And when of course transmission is almost exactly the same whether you have it or not, we're firing all these valued heroes and then flying people in from overseas in order to fill these job positions. Do you think we're going to see more transparency in the media and in the government as a result of how upset people currently are?
Look, I hope we see more transparency, but you really touched on a good point there. We need to be building more hospitals and things like that. I think there's been a lot of PCR testing done, and it's $100 a throw, or $80 to $100 a throw for every test. At some point we need to sort of stop spending money on that and actually focus on those people who get sick, who are sick. So we've got we spent $8 billion on vaccinating 20 million people. Okay, that's happened now. But going forward, the question is, do we really want to focus on the 20 million, Or do we want to focus on, if you look at Sweden, they've got a 10% infection rate, so they've had 1 million people get COVID out of a population of 10 million. And that's in a country that's much smaller than Australia with a much larger population. So if you assume that same infection rate here and then 1% of that infection rate, we might end up with, say, 50,000 people who need genuine hospital care. And we need to make sure that's where we spend the money, and that's where we get our frontline nurses and we get the best treatment possible to deal with those people who are effectively going to need our help. And that's always been one of my bugbears about the way we've dealt with that, is that we are effectively destroying the strong in order to protect the weak. And I don't think that's the best way to do it. You actually protect the strong in order so they can protect the weak. Because if we destroy the strong, there is no one there left to protect the weak, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And such great points. And unfortunately, it doesn't feel like or sound like the common sense prevails in this case, because we've had a lot of nonsensical decisions being made, in my view anyway. And again, I know this is not an easy challenge to figure out and overcome, but I do feel, based on some of the data that you've just described and it's been available to us for a long time now, that we could have made better and faster decisions. Now, on that point of decision making and government, we've now seen our Prime Minister ScoMo come out, and he is on the news saying that we shouldn't have mandates and we should be opening the country, and the people do not want more restricted government. And I'm listening to this thinking that's a really good message that we need and needed a year ago or a year and a half ago. And he could have, of course, come to the forefront and fought the good fight at that time. Why do you think he's saying this now?
Well, I think he's saying it now because he's getting pressure from people, that he is listening to the people. And, it's not just the message, it's actually law. There's the immunisation handbook that says you can't force people into getting a jab. There's the 1986 Human Rights Act, Schedule 7, that says you can't force people into getting the jab. Section 5123A of the Constitution said that, medical staff can't be coerced into giving the jab. It's our responsibility as politicians to not only make law, but to also uphold that law. And that includes federal court judges as well, I should add, and high court judges, if you're listening. And federal law does override state law. So, it's time, the theme here is, we were happy to give it a go early on, but, and obviously we've got to protect those who, are sick from COVID, but at some point we've also got to open up and move on, and I think we're well past that now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. So do you feel like, because of those current statements, that are you optimistic that we are moving in the direction where these mandates will get dropped and we will go back to those agreed upon ethical standards that you've just described?
No, I'm not. And that's based on the comments made by state premiers yesterday, who described the Prime Minister's comments on Thursday as being dangerous. Now, I fail to see how saying that people should be able to be free to move around is somehow dangerous. I mean, if those premiers, and I'm talking specifically about Palaszczuk, Miles, Stephen Miles, the Deputy Premier, Dan Andrews and Mark McGowan, it's the same, Labor crew playing politics here instead of putting the people first. If they're going to run this line that opening up is dangerous, that tells me they're not interested in health at all. They're interested in command and control for the sake of it, and it's a real concern. So we need to, don't just contact me. I mean, I'm already on your side. But we really need to get to those premiers and let them know that we can see through their politics, which is quite just frankly disgusting. I mean, it's one thing to have ideological debates, but when you've got people out there losing their jobs, being injured by the vaccine, kids can't go to their school formal. I mean, that is every day on the street, abuse of civil liberties and abuse of individual people's, rights, so to speak. So. Look, I was heartened by the Prime Minister's comments. They were good, but I'm concerned that the premiers are going to continue to play politics, particularly the Labor ones who came out yesterday, using such silly language as, it's dangerous to open up and all of that sort of stuff. And the question you need to put back to them is, well, when will they open up? What will it take? Because people are going to lose up here in Queensland, December 17th, the cut-off date. A lot of people are going to be out of their jobs then. And I do not want to see, going into Christmas, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Queenslanders out of work over the Christmas season. And so that's why I'm determined in the next 2 weeks when I go back to Canberra is to actually get the Prime Minister to actually legislate away these guys, what these guys are doing, because their health orders where they think they can just run riot over every other civil liberty and every other law in the country needs to be stopped, and it needs to be stopped now.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I mean, this is what we need. If we can achieve that, and if you can pursue that and get that done, what a relief, but what an achievement, because I think we need to look at what's taken place and ask the question, are we willing to go through something like this again with zero transparency on the science and the data, and only the basic propaganda that's been shoved in our faces? And again, this is not something that is unknown. We know that now we can see overseas, we can see the things that are taking place, and we are not getting the right information from the government currently. Now,
and you make a really good point there, because the precedent's been set, and that's the reason why, like, one of my demands is that we open up the borders, and I really want the Prime Minister to go back to the High Court and clarify Section 92 in the Constitution, which talks about free association between the states. Because my fear is, because of the ruling made by the High Court last year, where they basically said state premiers can shut down if there's any sort of a health risk out there, is that premiers now will start to shut down borders at every political opportunity they get in order to push a political agenda rather than respect our civil liberties. So that is a really big concern. I mean, there have been a lot of precedents set here where our civil liberties have been eroded, and it's time we started to move back in the other direction. And that is why we're going to have to either enforce the legislation that we've got, which I personally think is actually enough to stop what's going on now. I think if we enforced the rules and regulations we've got between our constitution and our legislation, that should be enough to stop the premiers in their tracks right here and now. But this is where, as the leader of the country, the Prime Minister really is the only one with the authority to override the premiers, and he has got to do it, because the premiers, they've just lost the plot, quite frankly, and they need to, be stopped.
Look, I 100% agree, and it does seem like he's lost control. I wonder why he hasn't stepped in and moved forward on that, and I don't really know the answer to that at all. But what I do hope is,
I think there was a push to get these vaccination targets. I mean, my own target would have been, here's a date, and anyone who wants to get vaccinated by this date, that's it. We're going to open up at a certain date, and then then that leaves the choice of whether or not people want to get vaccinated up to them, right? But because we've set, when I say we, National Cabinet, so it wasn't just the Prime Minister, it was the premiers as well, set a target in terms of numerical population. That's given the premiers the legitimacy, and not that I think they've got the legitimacy, but they've used that to basically then coerce people into getting the vaccine, rather than going, okay, by the 17th of December or whatever the date is, that's when you've got to be vaccinated, by opening up and let people leave the decision about whether or not people want to get vaccinated in their own hands. So, look, I mean, I had that view early on because I could see what was going to happen. But that's where, I mean, basically my view is we need to open up now. We're at 84%. That in itself is a very high number compared to the rest of the world. And we also need to, of course, allow other treatments as well that I know many professionals, medical professionals, support. I have a real big problem with the health bureaucrats overriding frontline medical staff as to how they treat their patients. I mean, that is another gross violation of civil liberties, and quite frankly is dangerous. I mean, the premiers want to talk about it's dangerous to open up at 84% double jabbed. I think what's very dangerous is when you've got health bureaucrats and politicians who aren't qualified medical experts running around saying, get the jab, when the medical experts themselves, the nurses and the doctors, are actually being gagged by, health bureaucrats. So, things are a little bit topsy-turvy there as well. And that's something else I'm going to, try and do something about. It's a bit hard being one of a few voices in Canberra. There's 227 politicians that go to Canberra every fortnight. There's probably about 6 or 7 of us that are actually pushing back. So we've still got a lot of work to do, but we will try our hardest.
Well, again, I think it's phenomenal that you're one of the few that are doing that. In your opinion, why are not more of these politicians stepping up and looking at this for what it is? I mean, you know, I'm looking at this, you're looking at this, all of our viewers across the world are looking at this thinking something is not right here. And if we have these agreed upon standards, and this is the survival rate, and this is the comparative data that's not adding up, why aren't more politicians stepping up and trying to make proper change?
Look, I don't know, Andy. It's a hard one to answer that. You know, I'd argue that, you know, there's not enough. You know, it's it's the narrative, I guess. It's very hard when you don't get the two sides of the story as well. I mean, to be fair, these mandates in Queensland only came in last week, and a lot of politicians are speaking up. I think they need to go a bit harder. And I know more and more people are speaking up in Victoria as well. But look, you know, it's you know, a little bit of self-interest, I think, a little bit of intimidation by the media and the left wing. You know, and sometimes, unfortunately, because we've had this, you know, message about the threat of COVID for the last 18 months, I think people haven't been made aware of the threat of the mental health, the vaccine injuries, the issues, the social issues that are going to come with, like, hundreds of people being put off, and also the fact that, you know, I think everyone thinks once we opens up, the entire population is going to get infected with COVID. And, you know, if you go back to Sweden, this was a country that has been pretty much open the last 18 months. They've had an infection rate of 10% of their population. Even, and ironically enough, the UK, that has been locked down for a large time, you know, a number of months, their infection rate's about 12 or 13% of the population. And then the other risk is the case fatality rate from COVID, if you do contract COVID, so if you're one of the 10% that contracted, is no higher. So this year, the case fatality rate for Delta is about 6 to 6.5 per thousand, last time I looked, which is a week or two old. And the mortality rate in 2019 in Australia was 6.9 per thousand. So the case fatality rate from COVID isn't actually any higher than the overall mortality rate, which was across the entire population of Australia, not just the people who actually get infected with COVID. So I think we have to understand that, you know, we can live with this risk, and, you know, the risk of continuing lockdowns, we've got to also balance it up. So, you know, vaccine injuries, you know, the neglect of other health issues, suicides, the depression, and those long-term impacts that unfortunately are going to be felt by our younger generation. I mean, we've clocked up about $300 billion extra in debt over this that our children are going to have to repay, which I don't think is fair. I mean, I want to see a capital gains tax on housing above $2 million. If you own a house worth more than $2 million, you know, you've done all right for yourself. So I think the whole, you know, slightly going off the topic here, but, you know, we need a way to securitise, you know, that some of those housing profits, because house prices have gone up by 20% in the last year. So a lot of people who've been paid a lot of money to stay at home have also seen their wealth increase through their house, and we've got to make sure that some of that's used to repay the debt, because it's our children who are going, you know, who've lost their education, haven't been able to go overseas, haven't been able to hold down jobs. They're going to be the ones, and they had a very high risk of dying from COVID in the first place. As I mentioned before, you know, there's less than no one, you know, 50,000 people younger than 20 contracted COVID, but, you know, no one's died from it. And even the numbers between 20 and 50 are very low. These people they're paying the price for this, and both mentally and financially, and health-wise. So we need to make sure that they can. I don't know if you can hear the roar of the crowd there in the background, so that's good to hear. You know, we need to make sure that we give those children the same opportunities our forefathers gave to us. And if we don't open up pretty soon and let them get their civil liberties back and start, you know, playing to people's hopes and rather than people's fears, I do fear for this country.
Yeah, I agree. Something you brought up, which I think is needed to be discussed as well, and you come from a financial background, is the hit on the economy and the different states. Obviously, it's a little bit different from state to state, but I know for Victoria, you know, you walk through the city and it is closure after closure.
Yeah.
Most of my businesses were in Victoria, and it's had a devastating effect. And so I know firsthand the impact that lockdowns have had on business, and then you look at the impact that has on people's mental health, on people's ability then to, of course, contribute to the community moving forward. What do you think the impact on the economy is going to be like for the next 12 to 24 months? And you know, what are your thoughts on it? What's it looking like?
Well, I mean, the impact on the economy is it's going to destroy confidence, right? And particularly amongst our small business community. And I heard some of that other rally before where they wanted, they were arguing for the right to continue lockdowns. You cannot continue to shut down small business. I mean, they're already, if they're still survived the last 18 months, which a lot haven't, the last thing they need is a government with an ongoing policy. We're going to lock down every 5 minutes. There's a COVID case, right? I mean, we have got to provide certainty that their businesses, if they've got the courage to open a business, which, I can't blame them if they didn't want to. I mean, it would have, this must have destroyed so many people. We have to give them the confidence to go into business. And that includes our young children. We have to give our young children the confidence that if they start a degree, that they're going to be able to finish it and then get a job where they have to pay off their HECS debt, right? So, no one who wants to take a risk in this world, whether it be, studying or run a small business or decides they want to go on a travel to another state just for a holiday, we need to know that they can go back to the old normal where they can do that with the certainty of knowing that their freedoms aren't going to be impeded. So, and this is why we've got to move on from COVID, because the long-term impacts of this, I mean, the best way to protect people's health and well-being is through a strong economy. I'm sounding like a politician now, I know, but it's true.
That is true.
If we run the economy down to the ground, and I know you've got businesses yourself, Andy, I mean, mate, it takes years to recover if you can recover at all. So this is the thing that the media and all these people aren't talking about. They've been living off the fat of the land with government largesse for the last 18 months. It's been very easy for a lot of the public's the bureaucrats, not the frontline workers, the bureaucrats, and I'm talking the back office guys, making the rules, not the ones serving the people on the front line. They've all been still getting paid, including ourselves. I actually wrote to the Prime Minister at the start of this and said we should all take pay cuts, but of course I didn't get it. And none of these people are taking pay cuts, and they're the ones telling everyone else to take a pay cut. And I've got to say, I'm embarrassed as a politician, and I'm embarrassed that we don't live by the same rules that we've applied on other people. It's incredibly hypocritical, and it's going to erode confidence in governments when you've got people in government, applying double standards, destroying other people's livelihoods, destroying their children's education, their health and well-being, not letting them go to their loved ones' funerals. Well, at the same time, they're all working from home, getting paid the same amount they were before, probably doing a lot less work. So this stuff is really, really bad. It's an incredible abuse of privilege. And this is why, I've always been angry. If you go back and follow my Facebook page, I've been pretty angry for a long time. It was the vaccine injuries that sort of got me a bit more attention. But, this was the stuff that I was angry about early on last year with the lockdowns, was that, okay, well, it's all right for you people to tell everyone else to shut down your business, but you're still getting paid. So, this stuff has got to stop, because, we are slowly eroding our private sector, the people who pay the taxes, the people who, the volunteers in the community, and those taxes build the hospitals and schools. And if we trash our private sector, the people that build, pay the taxes to build these schools and pay the nurses' wages and the teachers' wages, we are heading into a very, very bad time in Australia. We will destroy this great country of ours. Not only destroy our freedoms, but destroy our high standard of living and wonderful way of life.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. And to be honest, look, it's been very, very frustrating and infuriating when you think about exactly what you've just said. I want to give you props for at least proposing to take a wage cut, and not that you necessarily need to, but the fact that especially, in Victoria, New South Wales, you have so much gaslighting and so much guilt tripping, where if we do not do exactly as we're told, we are not good people, we're bad people, then we have to suffer. We have to close our businesses, liquidate our businesses, all for the greater good of these lockdowns and the rules that have no transparency with them anyway in regards to how the decisions are made to do it. It has been a very frustrating process. So my fear with what you've just said and what we've been talking about is, if we do let this continue and we do accept that lockdowns are going to be the new norm, what is going to happen to small to medium-sized businesses? What do you, predict will happen to those individuals that are running bricks and mortar, etc., if we continue to allow legislation that locks down and mandates what we've seen recently?
Oh, we'll destroy it. It'll be the end of, it'll be the end of any sort of individual enterprise in the country, because effectively, why would you open a business if you weren't sure that you were going to be able to keep your business open? If it's going to get closed, even if it was 5 to 10 weeks a year, businesses often only make a 5% margin. So it might be the last 2 weeks of the year they actually get in front. The first 40 weeks of the year might be paying bills and rent and wages and gas bills, etc., etc. So most small businesses now run a very on a very tight ship, and they don't have a lot of leeway if things go wrong. So. And I mean, I'm sure that there's, being slightly political here, that there's people that have an agenda here in terms of destroying business. They know, they're aware of this, and they support that. And that is terrible. I mean, I'm a firm believer that, our country was built from the ground up. It was built by the battlers. It was the battlers who bled for it. It belongs to the battlers. And it's those individual hardworking people that get out of bed every day and put their nose to the grindstone that effectively hold this country up and make it the great country it is. And if we destroy their, intestinal fortitude and their aspiration and their dreams, we'll surround ourselves with fear and loathing and guilt, rather than, appeal to people's hopes and dreams and aspirations. And, when I ran for politics, I wanted to make sure that, we gave the same opportunities to our children that our forefathers gave to us. And I think that if we continue these lockdowns, that, we will destroy our children's future.
So true, so true. And again, being a business owner myself, what you said is so correct. You have so many overheads and expenses ongoing. It is insane to think that you're going to be able to have a lease, to have financing on equipment or whatever it may be, and have any part of the year locked down and unable to create revenue. And so I guess the question going off what you've just said is, you mentioned some people may have an agenda. What could that possibly be? What could be the reason to annihilate small business?
Well, I mean, it doesn't suit them politically. I mean, small business tend to vote more conservative. So if there's fewer and fewer small business owners, then they'll strengthen their position politically speaking. So, most small business, I mean, we consider ourselves a party of small business. I'm not sure, the way we've carried on the last 18 months that we've lived that motto. But I myself, I know I ran for politics to stand up for small business. I mean, my father was a farmer. He ran a butcher shop, in my hometown of Chinchilla, where I came from. Nearly everyone ran a small business or was a farmer. I mean, we had some teachers, we had some nurses. My mum was a nurse. But, those towns and those smaller communities, you go out into metropolitan areas of Sydney, Melbourne and those areas, most of them will have small businesses or know someone who runs a small business, and they will want the government to, they want less regulation, right? But the problem with less regulation is then that means you'll have less bureaucrats. And this is the problem with bureaucrats, is that ultimately once they've imposed laws, they've got to keep imposing more laws to keep themselves in a job. So, and this is one of the reasons why they probably don't want COVID to end, because suddenly all these, daily press conferences and all these rules and regulations about what we can and can't do, suddenly a lot of people in certain parts of the bureaucracy would no longer have anything to do. And that even extends to the media. Suddenly they'd have to go out and find other stories to talk about. I mean, at the moment, it's all too easy to rock up to these premiers' press conferences every day. You get one state doing it at 9, another state doing it at 10, another state doing it at 11. There's 3 hours of material there that they can run in their news feeds at night, and they can knock off the coffee at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and just, keep peddling the fear. And I mean, of course, fear sells, unfortunately. So there's a lot of people who are, I think, taking advantage of this situation for their own self-interest. And unfortunately, it's coming at a cost to our small businesses and those people who really value their independence and their ability to make their own way in life. Who generally, generalisation, but also tend to like to think outside the box and don't necessarily, feel like they want to go into a workplace, a big organisation where they've got to follow the rules and drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak. So,
yeah, I agree. And on that note, in regards to the media and some of these roles, I saw some interesting news last week that the government is giving the majority of media complete 100% tax breaks during the pandemic period and during this time. Do you think that sort of incentive is influencing the way that they're potentially delivering and broadcasting what's going on?
Well, I mean, look, it's hard to impute motive, but I certainly think that they shouldn't have been given that break. I mean, they've got a lot of advertising from the government around COVID issues. So whatever advertising they might have lost in the private sector, it's been more than compensated for by the public sector, i.e. your taxpayers' dollars. So I think now, it's incumbent upon the government, and I'm happy to say this on the record. It doesn't worry me. I mean, these guys have got to go back to paying their full wages and licence fees, because I don't see why the taxpayer ought to be subsidising these guys who, they collect advertising revenue, they make a lot of money, and there's a lot of wealthy people involved in the mainstream media. I don't see why we ought to be helping them out at the expense of destroying our small business.
And that's definitely taken place. A lot of small businesses have been destroyed. A lot of livelihoods have been destroyed. And I honestly don't think we've seen the last of it. The next 12 to 24 months is going to be big challenges for a lot of people, and not only for the small business owners, but remember, this trickles down to the staff and to the people that they serve and to the families and so much more. And it's really unfortunate that this has all taken place. But it's been amazing to see you, Senator, step up and speak your truth and fight the good fight. And so I want to say, again, a huge, huge thank you. What does the day hold for you, mate? Are you going to be you're at the rally, obviously?
And then I'm not sure, whatever happens, come what may. Look, I'll keep fighting. I'm off to Canberra tomorrow afternoon. And look, the big thing for me is I hear the people's voices, is to get the politicians down in Canberra to wake up and listen to what's going on and actually act and override these ridiculous mandates by the premiers, because really it's only federal government that can, put these state premiers back in their box.
I love that. Well, again, I want to say a big thank you, my friend. You're doing amazing things. If you're down at the rally, make sure you go and say hello to Senator Rennick. I just want to have a quick chat to Jake, if I can.
I'm getting a pretty sore army here, Andy.
I know, you poor thing. That's all right, mate. We'll work the guns. But this is Jake from Counterculture News. Mate, you're doing a fantastic job. I love your channel and I love what you do. You've been coming up with some great content and a great message. Tell me, what is your view and your mission right now in regards to what's taking place culturally and obviously with the rally?
Well, mate, to be honest, I've seen a lot of bashing going on from the side of the media in regards to the freedom lovers in Australia and people who want to get down to rallies like this. And what they'll do is they'll get a handful of people who have gone to the rallies and acted a bit extreme and done the wrong thing. Who those people are, we're not quite sure. They could be anyone for all we know. And then they've painted us all with the same brush. And then there's this narrative that people who attend those rallies are some sort of extremists. But hey, we're here today. We can see mothers, daughters, fathers, sons, grandmothers with their children, people fighting for their freedoms, for their children's freedoms, for their grandchildren's freedoms. And it's a very peaceful protest. People are in unity and in solidarity here. Whereas on the other side, when I went to the Antifa protest, it was some of the most dogmatic and ideological vermin that I'd ever heard in my life. And they were really blasting the people who were at the rally today. So the contrast between the two rallies has been exactly what I expected it to be. But yeah.
Mate, it's interesting to see this surge of the opposition protest in regards to again, and the way they've branded it, anti-racism, anti-fascism. It's quite interesting. I just hope that they all stay peaceful and that they do not clash at all. I mean, we want to keep this absolutely above board. And so anyone watching out there, remember, if you go to these rallies, this is about civilized discussion. This is about, again, just standing in truth in a non-violent way. But Jake, I want to ask you a question about being an independent media, because I have been absolutely proud to see individuals like you and individuals in Sydney and Victoria, the independent media stepping up and showing what's happening on the ground, shedding a light on truth, because unfortunately we've seen a lot of one-sidedness, in my view, across the board. How did you start Counterculture News, and why did you start it in the first place?
Well, mate, I've done a few podcasts in the past, but I'm basically somebody that's extremely interested in matters of politics and culture. I follow it every day religiously, and I started following guys like RV Yemeni, and I was really, really inspired by the protests that he was doing. And then I started to sort of get a little bit deeper into the sort of freedom movement that's happening in Australia. And there's people like yourself, there's people like, Joel Jamal. You interviewed Ozzy Kozak the other day, and that was just phenomenal. So I thought that was something that I could really identify with. So I started up the channel. My little brother's a videographer, so he makes all the videos. And basically my philosophy with it is that I'm a boxing trainer by trade, so I'm a PT. So when I get in the boxing ring, I only hit as hard as my opponent hits. So that's what I do with this as well. If I go down to a protest and people want to speak to me, then I'll speak to them and we'll have a civilized conversation, and I'll have a respect for that person if they have respect for me. However, if like today, when I go in there and then I've got the Gestapo or Mao's Red Guard trying to cordon me off and trying to block me off and pushing me and surrounding us and scrumming with me, then I will hit them just as hard as they get hit, in the proverbial sense. Obviously, we want to be as peaceful as possible today, but I think that it's really important that we actually get our message out there, and we get it out there clearly, because as I've seen today, on the other side, they tend to be quite venomous with the things that they say and their rhetoric and their attitude towards our side, whereas we are actually just wanting everyone to be left alone. We want people to be able to do what they want to do, and we want people to be free. So we want to, sort of promulgate our message of freedom and of, tolerance with the people on our side and on their side as well. But if they want to throw punches, then proverbially, I'll do the same.
Well, you're right. We're in a fight, and we're in a fight because we want our businesses back, we want our freedom back, and we want to be able to live our lives with choice and privacy. And we've seen that being stripped away over the last 2 years. And that's exactly what we're fighting for here and now. And so it's so good to see, again, independent media like you stepping up and braving that every single day. I think that we need more of that, to be honest. And if we are going to get a balanced view today and a balanced view tomorrow, we need more independent media, and we need guys like you that are brave enough to jump into the ring, so to say, and have these tough conversations, because not enough people are having them and not enough people are covering them. Jake, tell me, where can people find Counterculture News? Where can people follow yourself and also Counterculture News on Instagram, etc.?
First of all, thank you, and you're doing a phenomenal job as well. You're also an inspiration to me, and I think my page had like 200 followers, and I reached out to you and just said, I love what you're doing, and you replied to me, which I was shocked with, and we've developed a relationship from there. So you can see that people on our side, we want to work together and we want to stand together, and it's all love. But yeah, where we can find me is Instagram, counterculture.news, and just go on YouTube and type in Counterculture News. It's a bit of comedy, it's a bit political. Our motto is get involved, get informed and get involved. So we want to make it a bit funny. We want to make political issues and social issues and cultural issues accessible to the general public. And we want people to be able to get informed and get involved, my friends. So I think we're both on the same mission here.
Yeah, it's so true. And I've said this many, many times. I think the challenge that we've faced over the last 2 years has been a lack of education. It's been a lack of being informed. So the mission that you have, obviously, with Counterculture News is phenomenal, and I fully back it. Jake, I want to say a big thank you, my man, because you've gone out of your way today to head on down, help us with the Global Freedom Rally. If you are watching this, follow Jake, follow Counterculture News, because it's going to be bringing a whole lot more spiciness to of course, independent media, not only today, but moving forward. Jake, you are a good man, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy. Take care, my friend. Good luck with the rest of the day.
Appreciate you, buddy.
See you, mate. Bye.